Hey everyone, what's the scariest thing about facing every killer in Dead by Daylight? Whether it be their gameplay, their visual design, their lore, a certain sound they make, or maybe even just their balance. Let's get into it. Trapper, I'd have to say the scariest thing about facing him is probably the anticipation of stepping into a trap. There's nothing scarier than loading into a very grassy map and simply trying to navigate it, fearing every patch of grass you see, just in case there might be a trap there. That's a powerful kind of fear. Wraith, I'd go with Silent Bell Wraith as a build being his scariest thing. Wraith's pairing of the Coxcomb Clapper and the Ghost Soot create an almost silent and jump scare Wraith. He's one of the few cases where there's almost no cues to see him coming, so it can be a real surprise when he does. Billy I want to go with something a bit different, and that's his terror radius and chase music. There's something really disturbing about it. It just gives me this anxious feeling, and it pairs so well with the sound of his chainsaw too. They almost blend together to create this tumbling, gritty noise. There's a chaos to it, but also a brutality in a way. It makes Billy a whole lot more scary. Nurse. Honestly, one of the scariest things about Nurse, I find, is the horrible sounds of her breathing, but also her screeching when she blinks. Hearing her struggling to breathe, but also the piercing screams as she blinks is just horrifying. She's also a case lore-wise of a character being completely twisted upon entering the realm, where before she appeared fairly normal. We don't actually know why she looks this way, leaving your mind to wonder greatly as to what the entity did to her to make her serve it. Myers. The scariest thing about Myers will always be catching him staring at you from a distance, much like what happens with Laurie in the films where she sees him staring at her. The same goes for in-game, where you can be sitting on a gen, checking around only to land on him. It's even worse when you hear the level up sound beforehand. Or even worse actually, you've just checked an area, you look back quickly after, and he's just there suddenly. Super freaky. Hag. I think Hag just has to be her trap jump scares. She's so rare to see nowadays, but her traps have always been consistent in their ability to scare me. They're so sudden, and the jump scare sound is so loud and abrupt. I think it's also the camera flicking round to face its direction that always throws me off too. It gets me a lot still, nearly 5,000 hours on. Doctor's madness is still a really freaky mechanic to me, especially when it's really ramped up. There's a definite anxiety when you're in tier 3 and you're seeing a fake red stain, hearing a fake terror radius, seeing hallucinations everywhere, screaming repeatedly. It all adds together to make a very stressful situation, made even worse by the anxiety of where Doctor himself might be. Huntress. The scariest part of Huntress I think is her lullaby, but specifically the small chuckle she does during her lullaby. There's a little moment where she pauses her song and just chuckles to herself, and it's super freaky. It really exemplifies the enjoyment she's getting from all of this. Bubba. I think for Bubba it's the simple reason he's wearing the skin of someone. It's maybe more on the disturbing side over scary, but it's just one of those things. You stop to think about it and it's just so awful. It was made even worse back when he still had the Survivor masks too. I used to be a Meg main and I was always horrified when I saw a Bubba wearing a Meg face. Put yourself in the Survivor's shoes too, and it's just horrifying to think about. Freddy. I think DBD Freddy is a bit lacking compared to his vibe in the movie, but I do think his overall atmosphere is pretty freaky still. The dream world, the lullaby, it all adds to create a pretty scary atmosphere. Pig. A bit like Bubba, I've always just found her look really disturbing and quite scary in itself. The fact she's wearing a pig head always freaked me out. Back when I first started playing the game and I hadn't seen Saw, I thought she was a human with a pig's head for the longest time, and it used to genuinely kind of scare me. I was 19 at the time. Clown. It's gotta be his grossness, honestly. I think the scariest thing he does is during his Mori, where he sucks the survivor's finger. It's just, ugh, how does this man exist is my question. So gross with how he coughs, splutters, his gross laugh. It's all very blah and quite scary. Spirit, it's gotta be the facial expressions, the way her face contorts and she switches between a devious grin and then quickly back to an empty sadness. It's just genuinely horrifying. They did this so well, especially if you've read her lore, it works even better, and you just really feel for her too. It's horrifying to see this person almost trapped within. Legion. I think for me the scariest part of Legion is just the reality of them, the grittiness and down-to-earthness. They're one of the most plausible killers to be real out of the entire roster. You could totally imagine coming across these people, and that's what makes them scary. This is also exemplified really well in their Mori, where there's more of a struggle between them and the survivor, and there's just such a brutality to the Mori. It feels really grounded. Plague. She's a tough one, as she doesn't necessarily have anything scary. She's more gross and disturbing, I'd say. I do think from a modern day perspective though, she's scary in the sense that she's from such an ancient time, and she also can't be reasoned with because she couldn't understand you. This, along with her fierce devotion to the entity, makes her scary in the sense of her just being so far removed, I suppose, from a modern day experience. Like, imagine on the flip side if you were teleported back in time to ancient Babylon, and you were only surrounded by ancient Babylonians and you had to try and survive. It would be a nightmare. Ghostface, I think it's weirdly the joy he seems to find in what he's doing that's the scariest. In the lobby he appears to chuckle to himself after doing a little jump scare. In his Mori he casually takes a picture with the survivors. I think it's this persona paired up with the brutal reality of Ghostface being such a meticulous and thoughtful killer. Demogorgon. It's hard because he's such a good boy, but I've always thought Demogorgon's outline, kind of, is quite scary. It's sort of an uncanny valley kind of thing, a humanoid-shaped creature, but it looks so stretched out and contorted. The very first shot of it you see in Season 1 of Stranger Things has always really got to me. It looked genuinely pretty freaky there. And in-game, it still, looks pretty scary. Only I'd have to go with his brutality. This is both in gameplay and in lore. In gameplay, it's shown off with how he slams down his Kanabo or rips out the tongue of the survivor when using his Mori. Then in lore, or in cosmetics, you can see it in outfits like Ice Cold Legacy, where implanted into his sword is someone's face. Then you look at his add-ons and see the scalp top knot or the lion tattoo charm. All of them paint this picture of brutality. Deathslinger, I've always found his reeling quite scary when facing him. After getting hit by the spear gun, he chuckles and slowly reels you in, and you have to face him down directly as you try to struggle free. The way he grins and stares you down really adds to it all. Pyramid Head. I think how uncomfortable he is what makes him scary. The way he scrapes his huge blade across the ground, the uncomfortable sort of contorted posture he has, and the lack of discernible features due to the huge pyramid on his head. All of it makes him really scary to be chased by, I think. Blight. I'd say Blight's twisted humanity is the scariest thing about him. How he's so clearly human, but there's so many small elements that are just so freaky and off-putting and make him look so inhuman at the same time. His 6 fingers, his drooping jaw, even his crooked cane adds to this. Twins. Twins are pretty tricky, but a gameplay one I always find scary is the rare times when Victor manages to trap you in a locker, holding it shut, and you're just waiting for Charlotte to arrive, hoping you can get out in time as this tiny guy holds you in. I find that pretty scary. Trickster. This is another many may say there isn't one for, but I think similar to Legion, the horror is quite a relevant and current one. The horror of power and control, the ability for someone to be a star, adored by fans, and use this for their own twisted pleasures. It's horrifying and it's horribly relevant to the current day. Nemesis. He's a big guy and he's got stompy feet. Yep. It's probably just this. He's huge and imposing, and he's able to crush you easily with one stomp of his boot. That's pretty horrifying. And I guess gameplay-wise, it's his tunneling, I guess. He's always coming right back to the hook. Pinhead. It's got to be the Mori. The moment when Pinhead wraps the survivor in chains and sends them to hell is genuinely quite horrifying. It's the mystery of where they're really going and what's going to happen to them that just feels genuinely quite scary to think about. Artist. I think the scariest part of Artist is her strange appearance, her elongated body, and ink which flows through her. I think it's all the more scary and disturbing because we don't really know what happened between before the realm and coming to it. She was a normal human before, so how did she end up looking like this? It reveals the horrors of the entity and just makes your mind wander. Sadako. I've got to go for the simple and obvious pick of her lobby jump scares. Along with Hag's jump scares, they're some of the only ones in game to actually shock me, and many others too. It's very freaky too, with the sound it's paired up with and the sudden appearance of her eye on the screen. Really well done, even all these years on. Dredge. Dredge I'd have to go with its nightfall state, of course. There's such a combination of horrifying things about this which is genuinely quite scary to experience. The blackout darkness that suddenly sweeps the map, the horrible sounds of hundreds of people moaning, the crunching flesh of Dredge as it moves along during the trials. All of it comes together to create just this horrific soundscape. Also for Dredge, getting grabbed by it after it teleports to your locker is really freaky too, I hate that. Wesker, he's a bit tricky admittedly because he's such a goofy guy. I think the scariest thing about Wesker is shown off in his blighted cosmetic. It's the extent he'll go to experiment and further his scientific discovery. In this outfit's description, we learn that out of all the killers, he's the one killer to inject himself with the serum, wanting to grow stronger and see how it interacted with Ouroboros. The idea of someone like this is pretty scary, I think. Knight, I think a good gameplay one is getting chased by the jailer, with the way he lets out a high-pitched screech as he begins his chase. I've always found that pretty scary, to be honest. It's especially bad too when you're sandwiched between a guard and the knight himself, the stress of dealing with two characters at once. Skull Merchant. This is a tough one, but one thing I've always found pretty scary about her can be found on her map. Shelter Woods. Here you can find her workshop. On the table you can see her various attempts and prototypes of her blade, and outside you can see the horrifying range of mannequins mixed with actual people, and the horrific claw marks she's left behind. So I find her weapon very scary, the power behind it and the damage it can do. Singularity. The fact he essentially absorbs people and takes their genes, I think is his scariest thing. The way you can see the flesh mixed with metal on his body, and you can go onto his map too and see the various corpses around, tangled in with the environment, many of them resembling his own skins. This horrific reality of him essentially incorporating these people into him, I find very scary. Especially as he's trying to do that to you as well during the trials. He constantly goes on about genes, and gene integrity, and wanting genes. He's obsessed. Xenomorph, I've always found their anatomy pretty scary, their sleekness and silence, but also these stranger things like their inner mouth, or even the chest bursters from the films. It's a very alien, if that makes sense, which I think makes it scary. Chucky. I think it's largely his size that makes him scary often, especially in gameplay. There are times when you're on a generator and you hear him chuckle and you see the footfalls around you, but you don't quite know where he is. I think his sneakiness is quite scary. This applies to him generally, I think. Gameplay aside, it's like this in the films too. Unknown. We don't know what it is. That's honestly it for me. Unknown is quite literally an unknown being, and although we have good theories for what it is, the lore makes great effort to make sure that none of these are actually confirmed. Unknown is a confusing being with many strange powers and appearances throughout history. It's all made worse when you look at the thing and see this uncanny valley twisted being that appears to mimic humans and steal their skin. The fear of the unknown is the fear of the unknown. Vecna. Vecna, I'd argue, is a killer whose scariest aspect is genuinely his aura. The many stories he's built up and the horrors he's caused, a being so feared that his name isn't spoken. The Whispered One, Lord of the Rotted Tower, the Master of Secrets. He's just got insane aura from his years of conquest and destruction, and that's pretty scary. If people are fearful enough to not even say your name, you must have done some pretty horrific stuff. Dracula. Similar to Vecna, I think Dracula's aura does a lot for him, but also just his displays of power. His castle in the trials, for example, is quite haunting and scary in many ways. Seeing this huge looming building hanging over you feels imposing. Dracula is fairly similar in effect too, especially with his many powers and his true form, where he becomes truly monstrous. Houndmaster. I'd have to go with how she treats people, particularly how she speaks to the survivors. She has a number of Mori voice lines directed at the original 4 survivors, and they're just so cruel and horrible.
Oh, some leader. Feed the rats, you salty maggot. I'll use your face to scare the rats.
It's really just very horrific to listen to. I think just the way she speaks about them and views them is really scary and horrifying. The clear joy in how sadistic she is, mocking these people before she steps on them and brutally kills them. Kaneki. I think the scariest part of Kaneki is how lacking in control he is in the realm seemingly. It's a constant battle in the series for him to hold back or hone the ghoul within. But in the realm, it seems he's constantly on edge and hungry, making him persistently moan and struggle. It's very uncomfortable and makes him a lot more horrifying to face. Springtrap. I'd say Springtrap's scariest element simply has to be his appearance, with the visuals of a half-rotten corpse trapped within the old tattered animatronic suit. It's a very striking and scary look. There's also of course his gameplay jump scares too when he grabs you in the security office, which are always scary as well. When they naturally occur. So, one of those. Krasue. It's got to be Burong's freaky smile, honestly, that I find the scariest. I think it's particularly scary because of how sharply it contrasts to her Krasue form. The eerie wide smile which cuts into the horrible sounds of tearing flesh, and then a floating head with intestines flopping down. It's quite the contrast, especially on her one purple skin as well. Let me know as always what you think the scariest thing about each of the killers is down below. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.